Hey everyone, it's Rob Foglia and Jessica Klein with Foglia Properties here with Keller Williams in Nashville, and we wanted to come to you with part three of basically our forbearance series that we've been putting together here. These Facebook Live videos, or if you're seeing them on YouTube, these videos that we've been putting together, basically on what forbearance means, what your options are, and what you can do about it. And without further ado, let's jump in and get started. Does that sound good, Jessica?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, cool. And so what we've got pulled up here, actually, before we even look at anything, is this is an article from the Washington Post published today that said that, some 3.6 million Americans are now past due on their house payments, the most since 2015. And this is why we wanted to come to you with this information here over the last week and a half, 2 weeks. As you can see, record unemployment is causing these issues. And the national delinquency rate on mortgages has gone up to almost 6.5% in April. I mean, it's more than double what it was in March. It's crazy. And I know some of these will be just fine. Like they're like, if you've watched the other videos that we've talked about forbearance, you've seen what we've been talking about, that there are options that are good options with this. So some of y'all may be just fine, and yet at the same time, we want y'all to know about your options if you are having some issues. Let's see. So let's jump into this. Does that sound good? Basically, the roadmap.
Yeah, sure. And just to, I think it was clear anyway, but just to reiterate, that 6.45% is different from the 8.8% of people in forbearance. I think that's what it was.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and like you said, these numbers
right here,
they're different.
8.
Yeah, there you go. So 8.16% in forbearance and 6.45 in delinquency. And I mean, those are big numbers. those are very important numbers, and they are essentially added together. So it's someone in forbearance is likely not delinquent, and I don't know. Anyway, yeah. So
you're right. You're right. These are huge numbers. I mean, you can just see the jump from. I mean, it was more than double what it was in March, and this is why, again, we wanted to come to y'all, because as I'm hopefully y'all have heard us say, and this may be the first time you've seen our videos with Foglia Properties, and yet a big part of our mission is to educate and to keep y'all informed, not just to give y'all the fluff, to give y'all the real stuff, and this is the real stuff, and ultimately, just by the numbers, roughly 6.5% of the people watching this video are going to need help. They're in delinquency, and so we want to give you the information that you need to help you. So.
Right, exactly, and yeah, check out the previous videos to get up to this point, and now we're here to talk about the situation where you really need to sell.
Yeah, because ultimately with forbearance, and to give you the 10-second like Cliff Notes version of the last couple of videos, like we or probably a little more than 10 seconds, but forbearance is basically your payment deferring, you're deferring your mortgage payments. And we went through what it looks like if you're currently employed, some options that maybe you can even not go through forbearance. Last video that we did on Tuesday was all about if you're currently unemployed, and we basically went through all the way up through preparing for repayment, because there are some good, forbearance repayment types. It just depends on what your company looks like. So, or your mortgage company, I should say, looks like, because you're likely have one of these four options. Hopefully you have the top couple here, which they're most beneficial for you. And however, if you're in one of these situations and you've applied for forbearance, you're going to probably be in a little bit of trouble. And so, the preparing for repayment, unfortunately for some of y'all, these top four options don't exist. Like, you don't have retirement funds. You don't want to declare bankruptcy because you're like, man, I got so much equity in my home. I just don't want to tear my credit up. Let's figure something out. Maybe you don't have the reserves or the savings, and you can't really get a personal loan because you are unemployed right now, or, just finances are tough. So we want to go through basically what the selling process looks like if you have equity and if you don't have equity, because ultimately what we're seeing right now is that, and we threw the stat out on Tuesday, and yet I'll reiterate it real quick. Reserves and savings, so many people don't have that right now. And I wish, I wish you did. I wish we had the ability to go back in time and probably put more money aside. And yet, what's the old stat, Jessica? I believe it's 70% of people have less than $1,000 in the bank.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's it.
or in savings, I should say, for like a rainy day. And so because of that, ultimately you may be house rich and cash poor, meaning you have a lot of equity in your home. If you've been in your home since like 2010, you probably have your home value probably doubled if you're in Middle Tennessee, maybe more than that. And so you may have a ton of equity, and yet if you're unemployed, you can't tap into that equity. And so these are basically your options and how things look. You can sell before you default on payments. So if you've applied for forbearance, you've basically pushed pause on default, and yet it's going to come. You're going to have to pay at some point here. And so you could definitely sell before default. Right now we can definitely help you sell your home. I mean, homes are still selling quickly, which is the crazy part of this market. Like, we had a new listing just the other day go to market, and we had multiple showings the first day, great offer on the first day on the market. And so it's still happening out there. So you could definitely sell before default. It's going to preserve your credit. You could save your proceeds. You could rent and downsize it until the market dips. If you're in a situation where you're unemployed and you're worried, well, if I sell, I can't buy because I don't have income coming in. I can't get a mortgage. You could definitely rent and downsize for a year, get your feet under you. If you have, a fair amount of proceeds, you're going to have that nest egg. You're going to have that safety net. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and especially, I mean, renting is absolutely an option. The downsizing option really is a great option. I mean, if you have a ton of equity and you can put a sizable down payment on a much smaller home, then you're in a position to not only have smaller payments, but you're also in a position to gain lots of equity in a home, going forward. So it's a double positive.
Yeah, it definitely could work out. As long as they can qualify for a mortgage, it definitely could
Right.
work
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
The thing that could happen though, that ultimately I think people don't necessarily think about, because they're like, man, I have a lot of equity in the home. I can't be foreclosed on, right? Like, that's probably, like, some people I'm sure are thinking that, like, just to not jump screens. Some of the 6.5% here that we just talked about, some of those are thinking, well, hey, I've got, just say I own a $400,000 home, and I bought it 2 years ago, or not 2 years, but 10 years ago for 200,000. I've got 200,000 in equity. They can't foreclose on me. Well, they can if you're not paying your mortgage. And so if you were to go through a foreclosure sale, the biggest thing that we want to point out here, and y'all can read everything that's on here, and the biggest things that we want to point out is that it's a public sale for the bank's benefit. Ultimately, the bank's not going to care what that home sells for as long as they get their money back. And they're going to get their money back because there's so much equity in properties right now. Like, that's not going to be a trouble for them. Like, they're going to set the price. An investor is going to love it because they're going to be able to buy it at a discount. That $400,000 home we were just talking about, they're probably going to be able to buy it for $320,000, $350,000, somewhere in there. They're going to get a great deal on it. The bank makes their money back, and the previous owner, they get what's left. And that's what ultimately worries us, because again, that situation, that scenario, that hypothetical I just walked through, that $400,000 home that you really have 200,000 plus in equity, well, now you're getting half of that basically once all is said and done.
Yeah, and the bank really runs the show in a foreclosure process. So if you can get ahead of it, if you know it's coming and you can get ahead of it, then that's absolutely the way to go.
Absolutely. And the thing too that would worry me about this is that it's going to hurt your credit. I mean, you're going to have to rent for a few years because of it. You won't be able to get a loan. It's just it's not the best situation. And so obviously, we want people to keep their home. Like, we want you to know that, like, this is letter E on here for a reason. Like, these are the options that you could use to keep your home. And yet, if you know you're not going to be able to, if you're looking at things right now and you're like, man, things are looking bleak, we're definitely have to take a step back. Things just aren't working out. I mean, I don't know about you, Jessica. I've seen so many like 2020 memes over the last couple of days about like what I was expecting 2020 to be like, and then what it actually is. Like, if you're that actually is 2020 meme right now, and I don't mean to make light of the situation, but if you are, then let's take action with letter A here, so that way you can get taken care of. You're protecting your equity, you're protecting your proceeds, rather than unfortunately going through letter B and being at the mercy of the bank.
Yeah, and I think in any situation like the one that everyone is sort of in right now, where you have lots of change and uncertainty, the best thing is to be proactive and take positive steps where you can. Mm-hmm. So whether that's, doing A through D up above, or if you think that selling is your best option, just being proactive about it is the best.
Exactly. You can be proactive about it. And we did go into some detail on these in the last video. So if you're here and if you're watching this and you're like, man, I really would love to know more about this stuff, go back and find our last video. It was our market update on May 19th. If you're seeing this on Facebook, just scroll back on the Facebook feed. I'm sure you'll find it. It's on YouTube as well, though. And so still, this is almost like a good scenario for some that are going to need to sell. You have equity in your home. You've been there for a while, and you can get out from under it. Like, you have options. The part that's even honestly scarier is this one, is the without equity portion. And what we mean by that, and for those that don't know, or they're, you're not in real estate, you don't speak the terms, your equity is basically the difference between what your home is worth and what you owe on any debts, any mortgages on that property. And so if, say, hypothetically, you bought your home a year ago, you haven't seen a ton of appreciation, because our market has been pretty stable the last year, although we haven't seen massive growth. So we haven't seen a ton of appreciation over the last year, and maybe you don't have a ton of equity in the property. Well, if that's the case, you still can go through and sell before you default if you're in that situation, like we just talked about with this letter A. If you're in that situation and you don't have equity, you can still sell before default. You just need to bring some cash to the table. This way, you still can preserve credit. You can rent until the market dips, and then eventually buy back in at a reduced price. So, and what we mean by that is, just say that the market value for your home is $300,000, and the market does dip, and we don't know that it will. However, again, not to jump screens, but when we look at numbers like this, and when we see that it's, 3 times the previous single month record set in 2008, that's cause for concern about what the market will do long term. And if the market does dip, well, you could get that $300,000 home for a lower number at least. The other options that you have are a short sale and the foreclosure sale. And we just talked about foreclosure sale, so we may not go back through it, although it is pretty similar to what we just talked about here with if you don't have equity. The short sale, though, what that basically is when you're selling the property for less than you owe, and you're asking for the bank to basically forgive that loan, or forgive the deficit.
Forgive the difference, yeah.
Yeah, and the trouble with that is, like, that was very common years ago, like 2012, 2013. Back, I want to say it was 2016, where basically there was a deficiency forgiveness program that was in there that stopped people from having, like, the deficiency, like, from a bank being able to go after them for the deficiency, or what. So when we say deficiency, what we mean is you owe $200,000, you're able to pay back 180 of that loan. The bank is kind of forgiving that difference, and yet that deficiency, they may have the ability to still come after it. Well, the forgiveness, act that was in there, and I'm forgetting what the actual act was called. It was an act passed by the government, though, when the market was down, that ultimately that act's not in play right now. They may put it back in play, but it's not active currently. And so because of that, there could be a deficiency judgment. You may be in a spot that's really rough, and the longer you wait to take action, the worse it may get for the time being. It could be in a spot where your deficiency is forgiven. Problem with that, though, is that forgiven debt is earned income. And so what we mean by that is that again, that same example, you owe 200, you're able to get 180 out of it. You have $20,000 then. That's called forgiven debt. That $20,000 is not considered earned income. It becomes a tax problem, because if you don't have, who knows, you may have the money set aside to pay those taxes, but then you're going to have a whole nother can of worms that you're dealing with at this point. And unfortunately, taxes cannot be included in bankruptcy. We don't know if Congress is going to forgive mortgage debt right now, like they did years ago. And so either way, this is kind of a rough spot to be in. And the biggest thing we want to just tell people is that with the market being as strong as we're seeing it right now, and we don't think that'll last for much longer, it could be 3 months, 6 months, somewhere in there where we really start to see it change and shift. Now's the time to take action. If you went through these options and you're like, man, the only thing I can do is letter E, now is when to do it, because then it's gonna mitigate your risk for having to go through letter B here, or having to go through letters B or C right here.
Yeah, and I just like you said, I mean, being proactive, taking action right now is so important, especially with, like you said, the market being on the verge of big change, essentially. And the sooner you can get to it, the more options you have and the better position you'll be in when it all flushes out.
Exactly. No, exactly. And, and because just think if like, just to jump back to the with equity side, if you were like, just again, if put yourself in the shoes, Jessica, of one of these people, the 6.5% that have, unfortunately gone delinquent with their mortgage, or even the 8.16% that have requested a forbearance plan. Put yourself in one of their shoes, and you don't have retirement funds, you don't want to declare bankruptcy, you don't have the reserves set aside to make up this difference, you don't have any family members that can just say, oh well, here's a personal loan, pay me back when you can. If you're in that spot and you have equity in your home, wouldn't it make sense to do this now before you got to letter B, or and the market changed?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really, that's the last option before you start seeing in all of these, bulleted lists that your credit is destroyed and you have to wait in order to buy again. And like all of these things start to snowball, and it takes a lot of time to get back to where you were before. So catching it early and being able to sell with equity is, I mean, that's huge.
And I'm glad you said that just now too, Jessica, because I mean, I can think of, just off the top of my head, a handful of examples of clients that we've had over the years that have wanted to buy a home. Like they've earnestly been like, I really want to buy a home. I'm still working on my credit. I'm trying so hard. Like I've heard that, and unfortunately, their credit is still kind of shot from what they dealt with because of a foreclosure and because of what went on, back during the Great Recession.
Yep.
And
Foreclosures, bankruptcies, all kinds of, I mean, these are really big things in your credit, and they do take a long time to come back from.
exactly. And we're not bankruptcy attorneys, we're not credit counselors, however, we want to educate you on the real estate side of it. And so if y'all have any questions about this stuff, if you're watching live, feel free to type it in here. If you're not and you see the recording later on, email us, info@foliaproperties.com, PM me, comment on YouTube. Either way, we're happy to connect with you and answer your questions, because again, it's not just about letter E for us. I mean, obviously we're here to help you with that if you need the help with it. And yet, we want to help, keep your home basically and keep your financial position to where long-term you're in a good spot.
Absolutely. Yep.
So,
I know doesn't look like we have any questions on Facebook.
Okay, perfect. Well, that was going to be my question for you, if we had any questions on Facebook. And so, no, if not, then anything that we missed that we wanted to cover here today, Jessica?
I don't think so. I mean, I know I've said it a couple times, just that being proactive and really looking at all of these options, starting at the top and exploring each one to see what can put you in the best position to really, I guess, almost brace for the future, or mitigate risk going forward.
Well, that's exactly what it is. I mean, it's bracing for the future, because I mean, the reality is, if you're at this point, like going through, a forbearance agreement, and these aren't these options don't exist for you. I mean, that's what you have to do. You've got to think long term. You've got to be bracing for the future, like you said. And that's when we start saying, all right, well, are you this path or are you this path? Are you the equity path or the no equity path? And then kind of what's your best long term outlook? Because that's unfortunately, we can't go back and change the past, and yet we can go down the right path for your future.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, I appreciate everybody getting on and check this out. Again, if y'all need anything, give us a shout. Either PM us, email us. You can call us too, 615-591-5665. Appreciate y'all checking us out, and we'll be in touch. We'll be back with more market updates next week.
Bye.
Bye.